We're now on Daf Tzadi Aleph, Amud Aleph, approximately 15 lines down from the top. Rabbi Yossi Omer. And the first word in the line is miyameh, if that helps. And we quote the Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi Omer ksubasa al nichse baila, which is a reference to the first husband. And Rabbi Yossi is apparently disagreeing with the Tanna Kama. So let's just quickly go back to our Mishnah at the beginning of the Perek. Here on Daf Pei Zayin. Rabbi Yossi, which is, I guess you'd say about halfway down in the Mishnah, he disagrees with the Tanna Kama. Tanna Kama established that when her husband comes back alive, she doesn't get any ksuba rights whatsoever from her first husband. And that's part of the knas. Rabbi Yossi disagrees. And he holds that she gets ksuba from the first husband. That ksuba is still valid. That's called ksubasa al nichse baila harishon. And I guess Rabbi Yossi is less, the word in English looking for. Anyway, he's less critical. I'm looking for a better word. He's a little bit less critical of her actions than the Tanna Kama. The Tanna Kama is so interested in penalizing her that the Tanna Kama establishes she has no super rights from her first husband. Rabbi Yossi has a little bit more of a compassion for her. Let's say instead of considering her a mazid, he considers her a shogeg. And therefore, he doesn't want to be mafsid her from that ksuba that she really should be getting. Again, as far as the sheni is concerned, forget it. She was never married to the sheni, as it turns out. But from the rishon that she was married, she should be getting a ksuba, and we'll let her have that ksuba. Rabbi Lazar, once again, disagrees with the Tanna Kama, who says, the Tanna Kama says that the first husband, and how much more so the second husband, have no rights to anything she finds or to any wages and money that she earns, or to disqualify her nidarim, what's called afaris nidarim. Usually the husband gets veto power to nullify his wife's nidarim, but not in this case. That's according to the Tanna Kama. And Rabbi Lazar says, "Harishon zakai b'mitziasa u'b'masi yodeu b'afaris nidarel." There was never a knas, a penalty that was enacted or established by the Chachamim vis-a-vis the first husband. That which is for his benefit, all the takanos, mitziasa, ma'asi yodeu, afaris nidarel is clearly doraisa. Those laws and rights should not be ripped out of the hands of the first Baal. He's not guilty of anything. So whereas Rabbi Yossi was more compassionate on the Isha, allowing her for ksuba rights from the first husband, Rabbi Elazar is more compassionate vis-a-vis the husband, first husband, allowing him to collect all his rights. And the logic is that there's no reason to undermine and nullify those rights since he was not in any way guilty. He doesn't deserve any sort of nas, unless you assume that why didn't he send an aerogram? Remember the old aerograms? Why didn't he send an aerogram to say I'm still alive and well somewhere there at the Far East? But assuming that that's not so, now the Chachamim say that he loses all his rights because those rights are inherent in the ksuba, and he loses the ksuba, or she loses. All the rights that he gets in the ksuba are quid pro quo. So, for example, he has rights to Masechet Yevamot, to her wages because he supports her. But now, if the ksuba is null and void, he's not obligated to support her, then he doesn't deserve to get Masechet Yevamot. But Rabbi Lazar is willing to have a half-baked knas, a knas that will only have an impact on her and not on him, because she's the one who deserves the knas, not him. And the Mishnah quotes the sheet of Rabbi Shimon. Let's just get that before we go on. Rabbi Shimon says, against the Chacham, against the Tanakh, Tanakh says that there's no yibum in a case where the first husband dies. And Reb Shimon Omer, bi asa o chalitzasa me achiv shel rishon oteres es sarasa. So it means that, let's say the first husband who came back alive has another wife. If he dies, then his two wives fall for yibum. And the second wife, that's called a tzara, she does not need chalitza or yibum. If there's a chalitza or a yibum, let's focus on chalitza. If there was chalitza given to the first brother, I'm sorry, to the wife of the husband, right, the first husband. Then the tzara does not need chalitza. Now, you could ask, what's the chiddush? In general, if two wives fall for yibum, you don't need chalitza for both of them. But here, you would think that there's got to be a separate chalitza for the tzara, because the chalitza for the first brother, for the first wife, is not a valid chalitza. Let's see how the Gemara analyzes this. Omar of Huna, Basroi, all these Tanoim, we have three of them. We have Rabbi Yossi, we have Rabbi Lazar, we have Rabbi Shimon, and they all disagree with the Tanakama. Modu likamoi. Basroi modu likamoi. That doesn't make any sense. Did I read that right? Basroi modu litanoim. Moi lo modu lebasroi. Oh, I see what he's saying. In other words, the last Tanoim who remove X, Y, or Z from the Knas. For example, let's take one example. Rabbi Yossi Now, Rabbi Yossi is a little more complicated. Let me, if you don't mind, I apologize. Let me take Rabbi Loz. That's a lot easier. Rabbi Lozer says that the first Baal still retains his rights through the ksuba. What Rav Hun is telling us is that with the exception of that ruling, meaning in the case specifically of Zakoi b'maisiyadeh b'mitziasa, with regard to all the other dimensions of the Knas, Rabbi Luz is on board. He agrees with the Tana. Let's say the Tana had X, Y, and Z, although he took Z off the list, but he definitely agrees with X and Y. That's not true in the flip side. Amoy lo modu basroy. The earlier Tanoim reject the later Tanoim. And now the Gemara is going to explain. Rabbi Shimon, who says that the brother of the deceased, meaning the first husband, if he dies, gives chalitza, which will now pater up the tzara, module Rabbi Loza. He's standing on the shoulders of Rabbi Loza, who came before him, who established that the first husband retains his rights in the ksuba. And therefore, if he retains his rights in the ksuba vis-a-vis Rachel, therefore the chalitza to Rachel is a valid chalitza. Do you see the connection here between Rabbi Shimon with regard to chalitza and Rabbi Loza with regard to the schus ksuba? Since Rabbi Loza maintains the schus ksuba, it means that the marriage relationship with the first husband is a very valid one, such that any chalitza that's given to his wife is valid now for the entire bias, meaning even for the sorrow. Is module the Rebbe Loz. And the Gemara explains why. The ma bia, the ikar isura lokanis, kolshkein mitziasa maisi adeh de mamono. I don't know where our first Nedarim got lost. But if we're validating the first marriage, according to Reb Shimon, as far as chalitza is concerned, or let's say yibum, which means that now, if this husband, the first husband, let's call him Reuven, if he dies, then Shimon is going to be having his wife with a bias yibum, and that's called in the Gemara's language ikar isura. That the Isha's relationship between this woman, we'll call her Rachel, and Reuven, is a full-fledged Isha's, such that now Reuven's wife, Rachel, falls for Yibum, and her Yibum will actually take place if the Yavam decides to implement it. That's called in the language of the Gemara, Ikar Isura Lo Konis. Ikar Isura means in the Ishus itself. We're not going to remove the Ishus and disqualify it. It remains valid and binding, such that now, when Reuven dies, Shimon, his brother, will be the Abin. How much more so should we validate the marriage to Reuven in terms of Reuven's rights in monetary terms, in financial terms. And this means we're always going to be more machmir in Easter than we are in Mama. So that if in Easter we're going to recognize this marriage, validate it to the point that we're going to allow Bias Yibum to Shimon, the brother of Reuven, how much more so then, in the case of Mammon, are we going to validate the marriage between Rachel and Reuven, so that Reuven does not forfeit any of his monetary rights? And now in the footnote, he asks, what about Afaras Nedarim? Rabbi Eliezer was speaking about Afaras Nedarim. There's no Kal V'chomer here, because Afaras Nedarim is Isurim, it's not Mammon. He says, Mikol Makom, Gam B'zeh yesh l'chale she'im bia shezeh ikar Isura lo konsu koshken shar dvarim she'enam ikar Isur lo konsu. So it's ikar Isur versus eno ikar Isur. Afaras Nedarim, in comparison vis-a-vis bia of Yibum, is called eno me ikar Isur. Let's go on. We're still in Rav Huna. For Rabbi Eliezer, lo modu leila Rab Shimon, but the relationship doesn't go the other way around. Why? Because mitziyasam I see that the mono lo kanis, avo bia di suru kanis. So we're not going to be machmir on that which is kal, namely dini mominus, but we will be machmir on that which is chamor, namely bias yibum. Travayu, both Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, bodule li Rabbi Yossi, that the Baal still has, that Reuven still has rights to the ksuba. Hani di Yosva to say, Lokan is Kolshken ksuba de la Mishkal umefik kod. He says that mitziyasa maisi odea, that's called the yosfa to say. It's kind of a temporary right that the Baal has. As long as they are married, he has those rights. And both Reb Shimon and Reb Elazar will recognize and validate those rights, even in the case where she got married to a second husband. How much more so ksuba, which is lemishkal umefikoy. It goes in and out. If they weren't imposing a knas in the case of Yosva to say, how much more so they would not impose a knas on that which is lemishkal ulemef. So it means that there's more of a logical, compelling reason to impose a knas in the case of mitziyasu maisi adel or yivu. If in those cases, vis-a-vis maisi adel, mitziyasu, they did not impose a knas, there's even less of a reason to impose a knas vis-a-vis the ksuba. Because in the first case of mitziyasu maisi adel v'yibum, that's Yosva to say, as long as she is married to him. Let's just see if Rashi adds anything here. Hani di Yasve to say, it's about 2/3, a little bit more than half the way down the page. Says Rashi, the Ikol of Meimar, Osi l'kiyuma. Oil v'noig bo minig noch. Not sure what Rashi means by Asin L'Kiyum. That means he's going to be Mekayim the marriage. Again, there's more of a reason to impose the knas in the case of Mitziyasu Masechet Yevamot than in the case of Ksuba. Why? Because Mitziyasu Masechet Yevamot are rights given to the husband that reflect the ongoing marriage relationship. That's called Yasva to say. And in such a case, there's reason to impose a knas. Because it's not Yasva to say, I mean, we're going to require a get. But in the case of the ksuba itself, that's something that is generated by divorce, right? If he divorces her, he pays the ksuba. She's getting rights through the ksuba, such that if he divorces her, she'll collect the ksuba. So the idea of collecting the ksuba is not to be makayim the relationship to issues, but rather to break up the issues. Now, if you're telling me that we will not impose the knas against something which is kiyum ha-ishus, it's the continuing survival and maintenance of the ishus, then how much more so we shouldn't be eager to impose a knas on that which represents the termination of the ishus, meaning the gerish. But let's read it again in Rashi and see if that fits. Hani di yosva to say, yosva to say means the marriage is extant. And now by giving him rights to collect Hamaisi Yadayim or Hamitzia, you're really encouraging him to keep the marriage going, keep it afloat. And a man would be more eager to divorce his wife if he's not getting anything out of the marriage. But if he's getting monetary benefits from the marriage, he's collecting Social Security because of this marriage, then you're really encouraging him to remain married. And yet, we're going to allow that to go on. And we're not going to impose a knas, according to Rabbi Loza. He's continuing his marriage relationship with her. That would have been a more intuitive application of the concept of knas. You want to break up this marriage. Is kolshen ksuba shezel tchilas gerishin he shakla ksuba. I'm not sure what Rashi means by tchilas gerishin. It's only after gerishin that she collects her ksuba. But we have no compelling objection to his collecting ksuba at the time of the divorce. But actually, we're upholding her rights to collect the ksuba, and we're not going to penalize her from the ksuba because the ksuba is an entity which is collectible after the marriage terminates, after a gerish. Curious, in the back of the Masifti has something called Bi'urei Rashi. I'm just curious if you notice this word, Tchilas Gerish, Rashi. doubt it. I never hit a home run here with the Bure Rashi, but still give it a try. No, no luck. Rav Yossi, lo modulahu, but the opposite direction is not true. Rav Yossi is not going to accept Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Elazar. He's going to extend the knas and apply it like the Tanakhama did to Nitziasa Maisiyadel and to Yibum. And why is that? Because Ksuba, Dila Mishkal Mefik, who Lokans. Like Ksuba is that determination of the marriage, let that remain in place. Alhani Dios Vituse Kans, but that which represents the ongoing continuity of the marriage, that we want to do away with. We want to terminate this marriage. That's Rav Hu. And now we're up to Rav Yochanan. Rav Yochanan Amar, Kamoi modu lebasroi, basroi lo modu lekamoi. Exact opposite. The reverse is true. And now Rabbi Yochanan explains. Rabbi Yossi is the kamoi who says that she can't collect the ksuba of her first husband. Module le Rabbi Eliezer, who said that the Baal husband has rights to collect a mitzvah, Maisiyadeh, first and foremost. Why is that? Suba demididei lidida lokanis, that's Rabbi Yossi, is kolshkein mitzvah Maisiyadeh demidida lididei. So there's didei lidida and dida lididei. Didei lidida means from the husband to the wife. And we have to cancel. Right? She was the one who was guilty here of marrying another man. And therefore she will be penalized, and we will take her rights away from her to collect from him the ksuba. However, Rabbi Yossi would agree right, this is called kamoi modu lebasroi. He would agree in this case with a kolshken in a case of mididol lidideh. Right, she's bringing in the wages. She found the lost object, and now she's transferring it over to him. Why should we consider him? Rabbi Yossi wants to uproot her rights to collect from him, i.e. the ksuba, but there's no logical reason to remove his rights to collect from her the wages or the lost object that she brings into the Mishnah, into the marriage. Again, I don't know, once again, where Hafaras Nadarim fits into this. Going on, Rabbi Lazar, lo modu le, right, the other way around, that's called Basroi, did not concede to the Kamoi, to Rabbi Yossi. So Rabbi Lazar will not accept Rabbi Yossi. Why? Because Mitziaso Maisi Yodea Hu Midida Lididei, right? These are monies that she brings in. Low konis. Aval Ksuba de Mididei Lidida konis. Meaning, according to Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Yossi overstepped his bounds. How can he retain or maintain her rights to collect ksuba and force him to, or his estate after he dies, to cough up that money for ksuba? She doesn't deserve ksuba. Vitravayu module l'Rabbi Shimon. Mahani dimichayim lo kansi is bia d'liachar mitzah lo kolchke. If during his lifetime we suspend the knas, for example, vis-a-vis ksuba or mitziyasa ma'asiyah, then how much more so after he dies should we suspend the knas? Just learn another line and then we'll finish up for today. Rabbi Shimon lo modu lahu. But Rabbi Shimon is not going to accept Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Lazar. And he holds that in Ksuba and Mitziyasa Ma'asiyah they did impose the knas. Because Bia Hu D'Liachar Misa Lo Kanis, the logic of Rabbi Shimon is that that which is only relevant after he dies is not included in the purview of the knas. Aval Hani, but when you talk about the ksuba or mitziyasa ma'asiyah, the Michayim Kanus, these apply during his lifetime, and Rabbi Shimon would agree that we should impose a knas. I'm not 100% sure I understand why ksuba is considered Michayim. Why do we like ksuba as Michayim? Oh, I see what he means. Because if he divorces her, then she collects the ksuba. So according to Reb Shimon, he's only willing to suspend the knas in a post-mortem. Because that's out of the purview of the knas. We're not interested in what goes on after death. But that which goes on during the lifetime of the Baal, namely, that if he divorces her, he has to pay the ksuba. And if she brings in funds, he gets those funds. That's Michayim, and that's subject to knas. Again, you might ask paradoxically, why should she be able to collect her ksuba? After all, if you're telling me that Michayim Kanis, so I would say Michayim Kanis should lead me to the conclusion that she should not be allowed to collect her ksuba. But then again, that's a question you could ask on the Tanakama as well. All right, then. So let's make a note of where we got up to. Miseis Shelo Bershus. And today's Tuesday, correct? Okay, then. So wish you a great day.